So I'm just going to answer the 4 questions from the review sheet that we did not get into in class. This first one is a sine function increasing through the origin can be used to model light waves. So if it's increasing through the origin, it's doing something like that. Okay, so if we know about a sine graph, that makes sense because it'll go up, down, and then there's the full sine graph. So start to finish, and it's increasing through the origin. So that's just a traditional sine parent graph is the point. It's saying that violet light has a wavelength of 400. That's the period. So from start 0 to end, that's 400. There's your length of one wave, one full cycle. And then over which interval is the height of the wave decreasing only? So if start to finish 0 to 400, this would have to be halfway in between, which is 200. And then halfway between 0 and 200 would be 100. And halfway between 2 and 4 would be 300. So it's decreasing from here. So it's increasing, reaches a max, starts decreasing all the way to here. So the decreasing interval is from 100 to 300, option 2. 5, again, the points were somewhat hard to read, but here's what they should have been. And this is obviously 0. This is 1 pi over 6, which means if it's all evenly spaced, 0, 1 pi over 6, this would be 2 pi over 6, which makes sense. 2 pi over 6 will reduce to pi over 3, which is what we have here. And then this would be 3 pi over 6, and this would be 4 pi over 6. I don't know if we need all that, but I'm thinking out loud here. So they want, it's a cosine curve. You see it's positive cosine. We have a midline here, which is going to be your k value. So let's start with that. If the max is 11 and the minimum is 3, there's 8 units in between there. So the halfway point would be 4 units above, which would put you at 7, and then the remaining 4 units would put you at 11. So guess what? Our midline, k, equals 7. They don't want k, they want b plus k, so we also have to find what would b be. Well, anytime you're looking at a picture, you're not getting b from that, you're getting p from that. So if you look at this starting at 0, and then the first cycle ending at pi over 3, your period is that pi over 3 distance. So if period equals 2 pi over b, and we know that the length of one cycle is pi over 3, we can plug that in, cross multiply, and solve for b. So b pi equals 6 pi, divide both sides by pi, and b equals 6. So k equals 7, b equals 6, 7 plus 6 is 13. Okay, if we jump to 8, which was the next question. I actually think H is a typo, so I should have cleared this up. I could have cleared this up quickly, but we'll still go over it because it's still worth talking about how you would appropriately work. They talk about the function g of x and then ask you questions about f of x. This should be g of 3 and g of 13. So they're not giving you the full function. They're just saying g of 3 is 7, and so is g of 13, also equaling 7. Why must that have to be? Now, again, these are cyclical. So when you look at these pictures, these y values, let's say of 7, keep getting hit over and over again. It gets hit here, it gets hit here, here. So at multiple places you're going to equal 7. But why do we know for sure it's going to be at g of 13? Well, the thing about a cycle is that it's repetitive, and it's repetitive every period. So whatever your period is, it's going to hit whatever that value is again 1 period later, and again 1 period later. So in this particular problem, your period is 2 pi over the b value, which is pi over 5. So we're going to keep, change, flip that. So keep the 2 pi, change, and flip the pi over 5 to 5 over pi. Your pi's cancel, and your period is 10. So that means every 10 units, we're going to be hitting the same value. So stands to reason g of 3 equals 7. Well, 10 units later at 13, it's going to equal 7. 10 units later at g of 23, it's going to equal 7. At 10 units later, g of 33, it's going to equal 7. We don't need to write all that. We just need to explain why that is. And your explanation has to come in the form of expressing that you know what the period is and how the cycle will repeat itself every 10 units. So since b is pi over 5, this is what you could write. Since b is pi over 5, the period is 10. And you would have that calculation to kind of supplement your sentence. The period is 10. This means the graph is pretty much cloning itself every 10 units. So if g of 3 is 7, then 10 units later at 13, it must also be 7. And that would be a perfect explanation. And then on our last one here, so we have a sine function. Hopefully you can see that. Now I just was using this for the last problem just to visualize, but here's the midline that means, right? So there's one full cycle, and then we're about to start another one, so whatever length 0 to this is, that's our period. But the sine cycle has a pi over 8 going on. They told us the b value, which means we can find our period. I'm not even reading everything else. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. If period equals 2 pi over b, that's 2 pi over 8. That's a situation for keeping, changing, and flipping. Your pi's cancel, and you get 16. So this length of my one cycle is 16. See, the pi over 8, whatever you see in the equation, the b value, doesn't really show up in the picture, like verbatim. We know we use that to get the 16, which shows up in the picture. And vice versa. If you're shown the picture first and you're asked to write the equation, the length of the period 16 itself is not showing its face at all in the equation directly. We know we would use the 16 to find the b, and the b is what would show up in the equation. But anyway, if you want a better scale, 0 to 16, your halfway point here would be at 8, your halfway point here would be at 4, and your halfway point between 8 and 16 would be at 12. So answer the following questions about point D. So we probably did need to know that 12. We don't have any other information about midline C or amplitude A, so we don't really know what this minimum and this maximum would be. But question A says, what is the numerical value of the x-coordinate? 12. That's 12 comma something. Show how you arrived at your answer? Kind of by that. That's showing it. You can't really show the rest of what I did without some explanation and wording to hear along with it. And then for B, what is the y-coordinate of D in terms of A and C? So we'll never know the value, but we'll know that it's whatever C is plus the A value, or the amplitude. So it'll be the C midline minus the amplitude, which is really your A value. So C minus A, because we know A is positive. It's a positive sign. So A is going to be a positive number. So we want to start at C and go down A units. So C minus those A units would put us at the Y coordinate of that. So if you have any other questions, feel free to shoot me a message, but those are the ones that were asked in class, and wanted to hit on those before your test tomorrow.